Life can beat you down sometimes with just the monotony of the everyday. Whether it's work or just having to get up at a certain time or the chores that you have to do, the whole task of every single day being exactly the same can just wear you down little by little. Here's an idea. Maybe if you try something new will happen. Huh? That's thinking. My name's Kent. I'm a writer, YouTuber, and self-proclaimed hummus aficionado.
Hummus.
I don't know what I'm doing here, but with you watching, that makes two of us. So I could go into a whole bunch of more detail on why trying something new, could be a good idea. But I gotta go make hummus. So how about you just come join me and learn how to make hummus? And if you don't know how to make hummus, then you'll learn something new. So let's go through all the things you're gonna need. First, you're gonna need a big old bowl, just like that guy, and also a hand blender, just like this. Now, you're gonna have probably a couple of settings on there. We wanna make sure that we're at a 3 or a 2, whatever the highest setting is for that blender, because we're going to rip it. Also, very, very simple, cutting board and a fairly sharp knife. This is going to make sure that we can chop all the things we need to chop. Garlic. I like to buy the expensive garlic. Don't waste your time with Chinese garlic. And yeah, lemon. Tahini. Tahini is very important. It is sesame seed paste. Kind of tastes like peanut butter, but it's a little bit different. You're going to want that as well. Olive oil. Always need to have the olive oil with us. And salt and pepper. Our two best friends. Always got to have that handy. Coming with us is chickpeas, 200 or 540 milliliter cans. Should be able to find that. And that's all you need. However, oh yeah, that's right. Don't forget your can opener for that. But we're going to up our game here, and we're going to add just a few more cans of chickpeas because we like to make in bulk. 5 cans. And we're probably not going to need it, but we're also going to bring in another bulb of garlic. First thing we're going to do is get that garlic out. So I'm going to just go real quickly and pull these guys out. And yeah, we're probably going to do 1 full bulb. We won't need the extra one probably, but you never know. It's always good to have extra garlic. This is going to be a little spicy, but we like spice quite a bit, so yeah. Gotta have that compost close by, so make sure that you have that compost close by to get rid of all of the husks. And to crack open these guys, just put the blade on it and crush the garlic lightly, and the husk will come out almost immediately. Let's do that again. Give it a little press with our blade. And takes a little finagling on this one, but boom, just like that, pops out. We're gonna go and do that for pretty much the whole bulb, all those cloves of garlic. Now you'd probably want to only use 5 or so if you're only doing 2 cans, but we like it spicy, so we're doing a whole bunch of garlic. And with that garlic, keep your salt handy. It's actually gonna help make this process a little easier. I like to cut up the garlic before we use the hand blender. If you actually used a food processor, it might just dice up that garlic nicely for you on its own, but I like this step of cutting up the garlic myself. Make sure you have a nice even blend of all the garlic together. Once you have it a little bit diced up, you're going to notice how it's sticking to my blade. What will help mitigate that is actually adding just a little bit of salt, or maybe a little more than a little bit. You can judge for yourself here, but you add that right onto the garlic on the cutting board. There we go, lots of garlic, lots of salt. This is actually going to release a lot of the flavor in the garlic right away, so that when we do blend it all together, the garlic is nice and prepped for us. And from that step on, we are just going to dice. This is probably one of my favorite parts. If you love the smell of garlic, you're going to love it all the more after this. I'm just going to dice all the way through. Line up that line again and again, and dice some more. Alright, now the lemon. Very important that we follow how to cut this lemon up. You take your lemon and you cut it in half. And there you go. You have a lemon cut in half. Bam! Lemon done. Now, the third step of prep is getting that jar of tahini, and you're going to want to give that a big old shake because of how that tahini sort of settles. Is there's a big clunky bit right at the bottom, but you want to make sure that you shake that all together so it has that nice thick paste all the way through. Even when you open the jug later, I recommend giving it a good stir, which we'll see. There you see me trying to show off my shaking skills that are conveniently off camera. But yeah, give it a good shake. This episode is brought to you by Harvest Crunch. Having a whole bowl of Harvest Crunch on its own would be crazy, but that's why I sprinkle it on top of my oatmeal crisp. It has just as much sugar as oatmeal crisp, so it blends perfectly while giving a granola crunch to my breakfast. The only drawback is Harvest Crunch hasn't returned my phone calls for sponsorship, which means I'm relying on you to fund my sugar-crazed habit. So like and subscribe. Bam. Alright. Now we're ready to prep our bowl with all the stuffs. We're going to start with our cans of chickpeas. Going to get our can opener. Try to line that can opener up. Probably easier if you put the can on the bottom. There you go, Kent. Yeah. Pop that can in. Twist it all around. Now you leave a little bit. If you have a strainer, you can probably just use the strainer, but if you leave a little bit attached, then you can actually strain all of that out. And that right there is actually guave, if I'm not mistaken, which is like the chickpea sort of starchy water. We don't need a whole lot of that for this, but a lot of people like to save that and it can be used in a couple other recipes. But if you want to be super frugal and resourceful, you could probably find a way to save that as well. Gonna fill some water in there, give it a good rinse. Make sure that it's nice and rinsed up. Pour all that out. And look at that. Got a whole bunch of chickpeas that you can shake out. Be careful with that lid, it can be sharp. And bam, we've got one whole jar of chickpeas. And then we're gonna do that just a few more times. Get the water, rinse it out. Chickpeas, rinse it out. And chickpeas. Holding onto that can, making sure there's a nice handle to make sure that we can rinse it out, and chickpeas. Now we get to the last one. We do very similar. We're still going to hold that can like that so it's easy, and we're going to rinse that out. No. We're actually going to bring in all of that guave and give that some nice extra starchy flavor that goes with the rest of the chickpeas. And then pop out the rest of that extra can of chickpeas. 5 cans of chickpeas. Now to top that all off, just because we have so much, I'm going to add a little bit of water. This is just going to make sure that things blend a little easier later on. So we have maybe half a can. If you're doing less, you probably want a little less water. And you can always add a little more water later, so don't be afraid to add water later and only add a little. Adding too much early could be a problem. Alright, all that garlic's going in. All of it. Yeah, that's right. If you are not as big a fan of garlic, you can always put in a little less, but that's not how I roll. Alright, next step. We're going to get our tahini, giving that a good shake. Get our spoon out. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tablespoons of tahini. And you see there's some of that clunky stuff there. That's alright, we'll just blend that later. There we go. Put that aside. And oh, yeah, lemon. Now you want to squeeze this. If somebody actually has a lemon squeezer, that might make this a little bit easier. But I just like to squeeze it in my hands. Feel that nice lemony juices drip down. You got to make sure that the seeds, this one actually seemed like it was a seedless lemon. But yeah, try and make sure that you don't get those seeds in your mix, because well, it doesn't really ruin the whole batch, but you don't want seeds in your whole hummus batch. So yeah, give that a good squeeze. And this is an optional step, but I also like to get some of the pulp into it. I should also mention that my cutting techniques, you should probably get your cutting techniques from somebody else, because as you can see, I like to play it a little bit dangerously. That has not worked out so well in other cases. But yeah, try to not bring the blade to yourself, but we're just going to get through that and get a little more pulp. And yeah, I'm going to do the whole lemon for this batch. If you were only doing 2 cans, I'd recommend only using the half. But yeah, we're going to do that. Get a little more lemon, get a little more pulp. Very nice, very nice. Alright, our friends, pepper and salt. So get a whole bunch of pepper in there. Once again, I love pepper almost as much as I love garlic. So lots of pepper in there, and indeed more salt. This is a big batch, so once again, if you're doing a smaller batch, probably don't need as much, but you do want the pepper and salt to bring out the flavors. Olive oil, sprinkle there. You're probably not going to need too much olive oil, but I would say maybe a total of 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Alright, bam, and we are ready to go. Here's the next step. Now, if you have your food processor, you can probably just go full ham on the food processor, but once again here we're just using our hand mixer, and we have this on the highest setting that it can go to, and we're just gonna go to town. That's right. And slowly but surely we're gonna see a whole bunch of chickpeas slowly become a nice hummusy kind of mush. As that blender is going, you can sort of see the water, the olive oil is helping make sure that everything mixes. That chickpea juice is also doing its magic. And one thing that is Kent ES Larwill approved is that you cannot overblend hummus. So by all means, go to town, non-stop. And slowly but surely, yeah, we're going to do a little fast forward here. Go to town, making sure that all the chickpeas getting all mashed up. Now, look, things are looking pretty good here, but talking about that water, we're going to add maybe an extra half can of water to the mix. That half can of water is just going to loosen things up enough so that the blender can do its magic. There we go. And then once again, blending away. Now it does need to note that you can add too much water. I have made hummus soup before, and let me tell you, hummus soup is not as good as actual hummus. So don't add too much water. You can always add a little and a little at a time, but make sure that you don't over add water. Alright, we're going to go back and we're going to add some olive oil just to give it a little extra richness. And that's going to bring it all together. And once again, we're going to blend like a maniac. All the blending, all the time. There we go. Yeah, and that's looking like a pretty good batch of hummus as is. It's pretty smooth. You can see that it's a little bit grainy still, but it's a nice, mixture. It's flowing. We don't see any signs of any chickpeas left. It's all mashed in together to a nice solid blend. At this point, you might even want to add a little more salt, a little more pepper, maybe even a little more tahini if you want. But you see, I am a perfectionist, and of course, what that leads to is a bit of a hubris here. But we're going to add a little more water, and that's going to help make it just a little smoother. Once again, you can see I've probably learned from past mistakes. We only added a little bit at a time. You don't want to overdo it. And if you're doing a smaller batch, make sure that you add just the smallest amount. And this is just going to make sure that everything gets mashed up just a little bit better. You see that? That looks like perfect hummus. When it starts what I call flowering. When the blender just sort of spits out perfectly on all four sides. And yeah, we're making a mess all over that counter, but that's what happens when you make hummus. There you go. Alright. Now that looks a whole lot smoother than before. But once again, because I'm a perfectionist, at least when it comes to hummus, not much else, but when it comes to hummus, I do like to make sure things are as good as possible. Adding a little more water. Once again, we added little by little by little, not a whole lot though. You can add too much, but if you do a little at a time, then you can most certainly gauge yourself. And unlike water, once again, blend in, blend in, blend in. You cannot overblend hummus. That is actually looking like a pretty awesome jug of hummus. Right on. Look how smooth that is. Yeah. And yeah, we're doing our due diligence, but bam, there we go. Now, with hummus, I like to get pita bread, and for that amount of hummus, you are going to need a whole bunch of pita bread. So make sure that you have your pita bread handy. You can of course use carrots, whatever else. Don't forget, yeah, Tupperware is good to have close by as well, because you never know when you're going to need that Tupperware for that amount of hummus. And if you like that video, then you can check out my book where I talk about that and many other issues that might help you. It's got a title so edgy, I'm not even sure if I can say it on YouTube. So check it out in the description. And as always, if you want, you can like, subscribe, and all that other fun stuff. More videos coming, of course.